So we are in the third week of PrideTT 21's events, and your participation really encourages us to keep our work on, keep this energy up to highlight the positive contribution of LGBTQI persons to our country's development. Each year, the management team decides on a theme for the year's activities. And given everything that has been happening in society over many years, but in particular in recent times, when it comes to gender-based violence, we decided this year that the theme had to be power, the play on the word power, but at the same time recognizing that the hers, the women, the femmes in our society, they still don't have the power that they deserve to have. They are still oppressed, they are still victims of violence and inequity. And the patriarchy, which has kept them at an inequitable level, is the same patriarchy that negatively impacts the LGBTQI community. And we can all understand, we will discuss tonight some of those intersectional issues. So that's why we focused on the history of our movement and the fact that over the last 30 years, while there has been Pride, it has been Pride and Hide, and this being our fourth year, we really wanted to select a theme that cut across, again, as many intersectional realities as it possibly could, because of how visible and open we are in this season of celebrating this version of Pride in Trinidad and Tobago. So we've curated over 30 events that align with this theme, and we have a number of partners and allies, such as the people on this call tonight, and we really want to thank you for your friendship and your support, not only on behalf of PrideTT, but on behalf of thousands of queer persons across Trinidad and Tobago who still cannot express themselves and identify openly. And that is why we are here, to represent for them and to be their voice. So tonight's event, as I said, is entitled Allies and Activism, and it is being co-hosted with our friend Amanda McIntyre, who is the founder of She Right Collective and has actually run some of the events this year for us. And it will be moderated by Faye Ferdinandus, who is one of our trustees and co-directors. So without much more to say, I will hand you now over to Faye and our panel for this evening. So happy Pride again and enjoy this evening's discussion.
Well, good night, everybody. Good night. Good night. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the panel for allowing us to share your voices and your thoughts. Amanda, so happy to do this with you as usual. And, this work that we do requires a lot of strength, requires a lot of support, a lot of time. But we could not do this work that we do. We could not seek to get what we rightly deserve, but which is denied to us, and which we have to face what I would say penalties, prejudice, discrimination daily in our lives from people who supposed to be the closest to us and from strangers. But again, as I was saying, we could not do it without our allies. And this is why tonight is so very important. We want to hear from our allies, and we want to let them know how important they are to us. So this is where we're taking folks tonight, and we want to hear what made them want to get involved with the work of ensuring that the LGBT community is seen as equal and have the rights that they deserve. So before we get into the discussion, I just want to introduce Amanda, but I'm sure many of you who are on right now may be very much familiar with Amanda. She has been a bold queer artist, writer, and activist for over 20 years. She has revolutionized the old mass baby doll character and quite well known for it. and is one of TNT's leading Black feminists who has championed equity and human rights. She is the founder of She Right Collective and co-founded many other movements. Amanda, good night, honey, and how are you today?
Good night, Faye. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a bit tired. It's Pride Month. We're in the midst of it. Every night we have something going on, and some days we have it very early in the morning too.
Well, thanks to you for that beautiful introduction. Thanks to you for all the work that you do. I can imagine how tired you are. And thanks to all of the hardworking, committed members of PrideTT who continue to bring this programming to us from one year to the next, to the persons present for the discussion this evening. Hello, I hope you're all well. And to all persons joining us in the viewership tonight, welcome. This evening we are discussing allyship. Allyship is very important, especially in any situation in which there is a marginalized community. Allyship brings a great amount of support to the cause of those communities. So within patriarchal systems, for example, in which women are oppressed and the oppression is identified as sexism, allyship will come from men, because within those communities, men are not the marginalized ones. Similarly, when a marginalized population is identified as a migrant population, persons who are not migrants would form the allied community. This evening, we are discussing allyship as it relates to the LGBTQIA plus community, the queer community worldwide, who occupies the space of ally and what does it mean in terms of movements towards queer justice. I will begin with a definition of allyship that I found useful. And it says, allyship is when a person of privilege works in solidarity and partnership with a marginalized group of people to help take down the systems that challenge that group's basic rights, equal access, and ability to thrive in our society. I think these words are very important. Basic rights, equal access, and ability to thrive in society. Within the queer community, for us, I am sure it's very easy for us to identify ways in which our basic rights have been and still are challenged, and situations in which our ability to thrive, not just survive, but thrive within society have been challenged as well. One of the main areas of concern for the queer community in Trinidad and Tobago, in the region and internationally as well, has been in the area of policy. Policy as it applies to the standard or quality of life for queer people as they operate within a larger world environment. Ways in which persons are treated at law, for example, ways in which persons are treated in social institutions, public institutions, hospitals, treated by law enforcement, ways in which people are treated in the workplace, and how this treatment relates specifically to their either declared or perceived sexuality. But apart from social settings, ways in which persons are also treated within home environments. So for the person who is of queer identification or who is even just perceived as being of queer identification, it is necessary to have allyship so that persons in their environment may not be queer identified, declared queer identified, or perceived as queer. Those persons experiencing privileges, which we identify as heterosexual or heteronormative privileges, work in collaboration or work as allies with queer people in those environments to dismantle oppressive systems so that persons of queer identification may receive the same access to human rights and access to treatment, equal treatment, so that they can have a better standard of living. And that's how we identify allyship. So the persons in the discussion this evening have come with a certain amount of experience where allyship is concerned, and now will introduce themselves one by one and tell us about the ways in which they intend to contribute to this evening's conversation. So one by one, I see we have this evening Joella, we have Nicole, and we have Nicky. So Nicky, would you like to go first?
No, I would not, but okay. Okay, you asked a lot of questions, so let's ask them out one by one now. So hit me
Can
with
we
your
have
first
a
one.
little introduction to yourself, Nicky? For us who don't know anything about you, maybe you can share
Sure.
what you've done maybe as an activist and
Um,
how you got into supporting and being an ally.
okay, my name is Nicky Carew. I suppose I fell into allyship. I was very active in the theater at one point, and having met great groups of people and whatnot, I always being a supporter of human rights, equal rights. I would say I fell into allyship. I have activism. I try to educate people one at a time. I'm an educator by profession, actually. Attend functions. Pageantry has been my main thing. Queen of, as far back as things like Diva World, Queen of Queens, South LGBT. So yes, that's a little about me.
Thank you so much. You mentioned that you are an educator.
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us about ways in which your allyship manifested within that area of your life?
I'm a primary school teacher.
Yes.
The system within which I work currently does not support the LGBT agenda at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we educators who are allies have to walk on eggshells.
Yes.
So it literally has to be a one-on-one, as in the see something, say something, hear something, say something, bringing light to other people with their, a lot of people have misinformed views, and it's usually just a matter of coming forward and being a voice and saying, well, we can't think like that, particularly we who are in education right now. We are, probably are, going to be the educators of children who are raised in LGBT homes, who are going to have parents as part of the community, siblings. We have a long way to go in education, but there is a glimmer of hope. We are taking steps, at least as far as I can see, in the right direction.
Thank
Nicky,
you.
I have put a pin and I've marked down in my notes. I'm coming back to you later on with a
Mm-hmm.
question, with something that you raised, but we're coming back. I don't want to raise that just yet. So Amanda, we're moving on to another guest.
Yes, moving on to Nicole now. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Good night, everybody. Night, Amanda.
Hi.
Hi, Faye.
Hi again, sweetie.
Right. So, I think it's very similar to Nicky. But it was only when I was asked earlier on to, like, how long. It's been a long time, over 2 decades. And I think it really just happened by accident in the initial stages, in that I had joined the Family Planning Association youth group at the time, which was called YAM and then turned into it was called the Under 20 Club, sorry, and then turned into the Youth Advocacy Movement. And that's where I met Eswick for the first time. And we were doing work in the field of sexual and reproductive health. And you're just doing the work, you're not necessarily thinking of who's involved at that time. And I do recall later on being in a different organization, and the question arose about why those people should be part of the organization. And maybe I'm jumping a bit, but it kind of helps to identify those types of instances as to, so the term allyship would not have been coined then, possibly, or at least not for the LGBTQ community at the time. But I just saw all of us as working together towards a common goal. And at that time was sharing information about sexual reproductive health. I mean, more specifically, recognizing that HIV, unfortunately, had been a focus in the gay community at the time, and still is in certain instances. And that also, kind of fueled some fear. So just being a supporter was always part of the work that I did. So the ally is to me still a strange term sometimes, because I always see us as friends and colleagues, and I find ally is such a more formal terminology, but I understand why it exists. But yeah, it was always friends, and there was no distinction around well, you work in this silo, and I work here, you work there, and when we intersect, we intersect. It was always about all of us working together towards a common goal.
Yes, I'm so glad you make the point about how the work allyship feels to you, because certainly sometimes when conversations are placed within academic framework, different words may be used that mean exactly the same thing in terms of how they function, but certainly feel differently to people because of the way in which it's received or the environment in which it is stated. But what I thought was really interesting, and this follows on something from what Nicky was saying previously, you discovered within your work environment of civil society, youth advocacy, that there was still marginalization of persons who were at risk, or persons whom that very community should have been serving. I think that is very interesting, and I would like us to return to that a little later. So we can move on in our introductions now to Joella. Hi, Joella.
Hi. So, introducing, I'm Joella. Joella Konai. I am the owner of Shikasa, where is a female organization. It's a social club for professional women, but we focus a lot on dance fitness. But it's mainly for professional women. With respect to, but my background is hospitality, hotel, and I'm an educator, but well, I used to, and I'm going back into it, but that's tertiary. So, but still in the hospitality industry. So I'm so happy that Nicole identified that the whole use of the word allyship and it being new, because for me, it's extremely new. Like, I didn't even realize. I think somebody asked me to be on this because they see me as an ally, and I didn't even realize it. All I know is that, but I will be very happy to be involved with anything, because I just saw, as I was saying, I was mentioning before, I just love the culture. So the popular culture that has been brought by the community, and because I follow the popular culture and popular shows, and so then I go into, and the international ones, then you do the follow up on it, as in following people on Instagram, finding out their stories, their challenges. And so I was opened up to, apart from working along with, because I worked in the hospitality industry, and there are always a lot of people from the queer community in the industry, and I am involved in the arts, especially dancing. Once again, a lot of people in the queer community. So it was just kind of normal, as Nicole was saying, as friends, it's not even a thing. I've had many students who were gay, and some they may have been like teenagers and didn't realize, or some told me that they were being a little challenged, but that was like a few years ago. So I am just happy now to, if there's anything that I can do, because yes, I'm aware. I didn't know aware that there was so much bullying still, but yes, I'm aware that some people are like, why are they pushing their own agenda? And it's like, they're just asking for like regular stuff, like normal people. They just want regular rights and representation. So if there's anything that I can do, and if it's called allyship, yeah, I'm an ally.
It's very good. Again, the point about the strangeness of the word ally and allyship comes up. And I totally agree, because I'm sure Faye would agree with me when I say that when we were younger, the only time, Rudy, tell me, the only time we heard the word ally or allyship was in relation to war and international relations.
Yeah.
In relation to war and international relations, or if you are probably Star Wars or Star Trek, you know, team of allies coming to defend, you know, the Jedi with that. But
there are so
in
many
recent years,
there are so many new words within the work that we do
exactly.
that many of us are still learning.
Mhm.
And every day another one comes added to the list.
Yes. So within conversations around advocacy, especially I would say in the last 5 years, the word ally gained a lot of traction. And just to reiterate, it is an understanding that within all movements towards social justice, even in those movements working towards the same cause, not all members are the same. Some members experience great amounts of privilege while others don't. And so those with privilege find themselves having to dismantle
What happened is that when I think of the word ally, I was just speaking it over here with my aunt, and that movie came to my mind. I think it's Thelma and Louise at the ending, where they saw it all, and the cops was after them, and they realized either they go down to jail together and be maybe manipulated in the system, or drive off that cliff. And I think an ally is somebody like that is willing to maybe see you through that fire at that end. And although it is an emotional ending to these two women, I think that is what an ally is. And I'm glad to be invited to this, should I say, meeting tonight, and learn more and you see and see how it goes and see how it goes.
Thank you, but we don't want you going over the cliff, you know. We don't any
No,
of
no,
us
no, no,
over
no,
the
no.
cliff. But
We have
I
always
know what you mean. I know what you mean. I'm
we
just
have always
teasing.
been to that test, and I think all of us in our life, we have been driven to that cliff, and we reach that point of no return, like Bridget Fonda in that movie Point of No Return. I don't know why I'm talking about so much movies. Maybe it's because maybe I'm missing Movie Town, liming at Movie Town, but we have all reached that point. Every day is a challenge. Every day is a challenge with many young people, and I think with an ally, we have to give that support, because look what's happening in our world now. It is so tormented. It has become, it's so confusing for them. I think that's what an ally is there for as well, to make it less confusing for them, to be a support. Let me listen, let me hear what's going on. What is going on with you? That's the most that we can do. The most that we can do.
I'm
Very
glad
good point.
I'm glad you talked about listening, because I don't think anybody outside the community, or even some people inside the community, really listen, hear the other side, see, look to figure out or learn something new, hear, really and truly hear what somebody else might be saying.
True.
Mhm.
True. True.
That is true. I noticed so many points of entry into the discussion with various persons coming in from different areas of professional life. And it just reminds us that, I heard years ago that the queer population is the second largest in the whole world. And that means we're constantly meeting queer people, we're constantly, but how do we identify them? More so, how do we identify a queer person who is at risk and may in fact need that support? So we're going to come back to that later in the conversation. Before we move along, I see also Makisa and Bobby here as well. So Makisa first and then Bobby next. Hi, Makisa.
Hi, good night.
Hi, I think this is my first time talking to you all of Pride. So happy Pride.
Thank you, same to you. Happy Pride to everyone.
So Makisa, can you introduce yourself and tell us some more about your allyship and the ways in which it operates in your social and professional spheres?
Oh, sure. So, good night again, everyone. I'm Makisa Edwards. I'm 25 years old. I'm the vice chairman of Uni Pride. Well, with allyship, I was always for representing and being a voice for persons since I've known myself. But I never had that background because my family wasn't really like that. They never understood why I always wanted to stand up for people. And now that I'm a nurse, I actually have like a greater impact as sometimes I see unfair stuff in the hospital based to people in our community, and I could actually reach out to my colleagues and help them understand, well, we don't do that. That's not nice. That's not something we like for ourselves. So that's one aspect. And when I was younger, as I said, I had that barrier, but it never kept me down. I was very persistent. I was determined that I will be an ally. I will be an activist. I will be the voice for persons who don't have a voice for themselves. That's something that's really deep to me. And being a young nurse, I really try to represent our community and encourage persons to, through education, through example, to not not put forward our subjective feelings to everything and try to come from an objective place and encourage the best and the highest quality care, not based on what we believe in, but what persons coming to us for, that is help. So that's something that's really important to me, and it's something I hope to work on for the rest of my life once I'm here. So yeah, that's one of it. I think that's enough.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And healthcare is very important and definitely one of the places in which a lot of cases concerning, especially discrimination towards LGBT persons, have made it into like the public domain. So I'm so glad you brought that up. But I want to go back to Nicky, because there are some things that Nicky said that made strong connections to contributions from Nicole and Joella as well. And I want to ask, how do you identify a person who is at risk? And by at risk, I mean, first of all, a person who is marginalized, but a person for whom you see necessary interventions should take place. How do you identify that? And of course, what are some of those interventions you may engage?
Well, identifying people in the community has never really been much of an issue for me. Mostly they come to me. I have viewed that has been my experience. They reach out, or they maybe have heard, you know, that this person is supportive, this person is involved, they reach out. Some of the younger people, past pupils, younger people that I encounter from different walks of life, they're wondering, how do they talk to their families? I think it's more just talking to them. I first realized that this was an issue by just, a long time story I'm going to give you. This is actually how I got into, I suppose, allyship. This young guy I knew, I'm talking easily 20 years ago. Never knew he was gay. He never spoke of it. And I was at Teachers College at the time. So this was a minute ago. This was a while ago. More than 20 years. I got a call that he had taken his life. And everyone was rather in shock. What caused it? What caused it? And after a while, it came out that his family had found out that he was gay. And rather than him deal with it, confront them, whatever, he took his life. I think that's what started me down this journey.
Yeah.
So I have tried to be vocal in my everyday life. People who know me usually know what I stand for. But what some of the other presenters have said, listening, being aware, being mindful, little things that the rest of the community the rest of society, could think of as just a throwaway comment, could really have a huge impact on someone who is vulnerable, be it a positive impact or a negative impact. I think talking, supporting, just letting them know that I'm in your corner. Worst comes to worst, you have, at the very least, a listening ear. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You know, that point about the risk, the suicide risk, I think is such a mark of conviction for so many allies, understanding that there are certain things that you may take for granted that literally for someone else may mean life or death. And I mean, that in itself is an illustration of privilege right there. And I think it's great that you have identified that as a point of focus for you. And intervention as it relates to listening, being aware, being present, being mindful, all very important, especially within the education system. Thank you, Nikki. And we're moving to Nicole with the same question concerning how do you identify someone who's at risk, and what are some of the interventions that you may use or interventions that you have indeed used within your practice?
Right. I think one key thing I had left out earlier on in my introduction was that I was mislabeled in the beginning, if I could call it that. I remember being invited to, I forget the name of the organization now. And when I told the person that I was heterosexual, the person was quite surprised. So I think with the labeling of allyship came my revealing. And I think that is when, as they say, kind of draw the line in the sand. But I think before that, I was able to use that, I guess, invisibility to allow me to then see things. So it's the question that you pose, I think it's such a hard question for me to answer, in that when you work with organizations, sometimes you don't necessarily get to identify, but you get told, you need to go to, we're going here. So you end up going with people. So the identification doesn't happen. And I think that works in a lot of positive ways because people don't feel singled out. Because sometimes when you have to send somebody to an organization, they feel as if, because I always say, depending on the name of your organizations, a lot of people are not going to step in that door. So if we can go to them, which is what happened with me in the early days, I think that allows them to be more themselves. And it allows also too for us to be that help. So we don't necessarily get, as I said, the identification happens, but we all come to help. So even the formalization of the work didn't happen until much later on, even though Friends for Life had already existed. But it was just us doing the work, Well, as I said, work is such a weird term to do, but you just do what needed to be done at the time. So if this person needed what they say, home care, you do that. If that person needed groceries, you do that. So there wasn't, as I said, this terminology of work. Sometimes I get a little to just use the demarcation sometimes, because to me it's all part of being human. So yes, I understand that some people get remunerated for it, but I think it's just being human and humane to other people. So the identification piece for me is a little hard to single out.
So basically, Nicole, you had to come out, but in the opposite side.
Yes, actually. That's a good point. Yes, exactly. So, and when I did, the person was quite shocked. The person was like, you could see the disbelief on their face, like for all these years.
And did you get discriminated, or were you prejudiced because of your then sexuality? Because within that group, you were then a minority within this group.
Exactly. And those who knew, and those who didn't know, it didn't matter at the time. But I think much later on, when I guess maybe either word spread or things happen, however they do that, it's not necessarily spread, but things happen. And it's a little saddening sometimes because you then get kind of relegated to us and them. So it's a kind of reverse discrimination.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it's more hurtful, but I wouldn't even go that far.
This is a safe space, to be totally honest.
No, when I say hurtful is that you're there all the time, and just because now I have a different label or somebody else made a decision to label me, I like, but you're lost for words, really. And thanks, Faye, for saying that. Yes, I had to come out to do that, but it is quite hurtful for persons to say, well, no, you don't identify, so you're not supposed to.
Or you don't belong in this circle. You don't belong in this group, this room, that sort of thing. Yeah.
And also to just the length of time that I've been around, I don't think I've willfully gone out to hurt anybody. And if I did, it was never intentional. I mean, and I haven't heard anything, but people get hurt by in different ways. And if it happened, I would definitely say it was never intentional.
So Joella and Nicky, you all come from careers that some people say you would find a lot of the LGBT community in. So you talked about hospitality, and Nicky, you're in the theater. Were you all also assumed to be part of the community and not an ally? Has it ever happened? Did you ever feel like, Nicole, or have that reaction?
All the time, especially when we work in the theater and we work backstage. There is no glamour working backstage. So we are usually in old clothes or something baggy, usually all black, sneakers, hair pulled back, no makeup. Especially when we work backstage, all the time. It doesn't offend me to the least. I simply laugh it off. But yeah, it happens regularly in the theater. I don't know if it happens to Joella's as much.
I've been in a relationship with my sister, and they went to all girls school. I have a business now that's for women. So yeah, whatever. Like Okay, moving along. Like that is such, that is so not even a thing, whatever. Like, I too old. I'm nearly 50.
Can I just ask a question of the ladies? So there's a quote by Ross Perot that says, the activist is not the man who says the river is dirty. The activist is the man who cleans up the river. So would you ladies classify yourselves as activists? And in so doing, why did you choose to become an activist or within this? And I know some of you all have touched it, but I think all of you all have backgrounds as educators, right?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So as an activist, because I see you all as activists actually, yeah, what does it mean to you, activism? Anybody could go first.
Me first.
Go, Joella.
And I
Go,
say me
Joella.
first because I haven't identified as an activist. So, because I haven't really, I could be, and I should be, because I should do what I can. So I am like an activist in training. Yeah. So I haven't necessarily done, in my opinion, what can be done or what I should do to like really help promote. So now there's a greater awareness because of organizations like PrideTT, because of discussions like these, that would let somebody like me who's been relatively passive about it, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, everybody has a right, and you know, I think like that, but I haven't actually been, I haven't shouted it up from top any rooftop. I mean, I'll go to any show that it has, and I'll have lots of friends in the community, and so, and but I haven't done anything actively. So now, whatever is needed to do, yeah, I will do now because I'm in training.
But do you see the work that you do at the studio as a work and as a possible activism as well?
I haven't used it as such, but it can be.
Yeah.
It can be, and especially because I'm looking to start back teaching, and it's going to be in the hospitality industry. And so if there's anything, but yeah, definitely the work that now mind you, the work that I do in the studio, all that happens is that what I've seen is that a lot of women just decide to try out more things. People are now becoming open. So when we have discussions, so we have lots of discussions here. So when we have discussions, and then some people, because you will have some people who are closed-minded, who are like, do the same, oh, I don't mind what people do behind closed doors, but keep it behind closed doors. I don't get why people should do that. So that is an opportunity to be like, you're talking trash, and you know, like kind of explain it more, because I'm also aware of others who are in the same room who are now having more experiences because they would have shared with me. So, you know, so like at the studio there with our discussions, or during the club and more of the activities that we're having. Plus I also like to speak to younger people. So like Gen Z who experiences a lot, who way more open than Karens like myself. Yeah, they are experiencing more and experimenting more, and some of them are very are very open, because that's the world in which they're being brought up, where they're seeing it more on in media and so I have discussions with younger people just because I'm like auntie age. So yeah, maybe that's a way that I do some activism.
Great. Nicky or Nicole? Oh, and before we go ahead, I'm getting some feedback from somebody's mic who's open when the other person is speaking. So you're kind of hearing an echo. So if we could just close your mic if you're not speaking, it's I'm not sure how disturb. Sorry.
Activism. I do not think activism is a choice. I think activism is a necessity. I think activism is something we are all called to do in some form or the other. And it's probably, I don't know where this point is coming from, but I think more people are not activists because there is a level of fear about it. When you get into activism, particularly activism for a marginalized community and such as the LGBT community in Trinidad and Tobago is, you get it from other sides, of obviously not 1/10, 1/5 as much as, but there's a lot of fear of people coming forward as activists. I think activism, being an ally, I think today especially, there's not really much of a choice. I think we are all called to this. I think it's something we have to go out there and do on our own. When people come at me and say, you know, oh, you're supporting this, you're probably gay and whatnot. My first thing is that, well, you know, I'm shocked that you think, you know, calling me gay is an insult, one. And two, I also support, you know, animal rights, and I'm not a duck. I also support nature. I am all about green living. I'm not a tree. So I tell them, you don't have to be gay to support LGBT rights, because it's basically a human right. Let's just go out there and realize that these are people, these are in our community. If you don't think you have anyone in your family as part of that community, guess again, you probably do. And you can be the person that is there as a support in, within the family, within your community, within your workspace. So, yes.
Thank you, Nikki. Nicole?
That's so interesting because one of the things I've found as a challenge sometimes for
Manda is frozen. I think she's having some connectivity problems.
Okay.
Amanda, if you can hear us. So let's go on to Nikki until she comes back in.
Right. So again, labels again.
Nicole.
It's just it's just doing the work. So activists came, I think maybe within the last 10 years, maybe even less. You know, as an activist, I mean, I introduced myself as a sexual reproductive health and rights educator, which is a mouthful, you know, but I like also what Nikki said, that, yeah, you don't really have a choice. You just do the work. And people label you, you know. Look, the feminist there, or look at there, look, she likes like those type of people, or she like hanging around those types of people. But I always say, you know, it would be nice for us to leave the planet or a space better than we met it. And I think a good analogy is litter. Litter, when we go to enjoy a space, wouldn't it be nice to leave it the way you met it, or even better, if there's litter there, you take it to tube, if you have the means to then take the litter away from there so let somebody else enjoy it. So I think just ensuring that the space is a little better, and if we can use from the feminist movement that I'm benefiting from a feminist movement existing, you know, and a lot of people don't really recognize that if I was born 50 years ago, I may not have been able to enjoy some of the things that I enjoy now. You know, simple things like me going places on my own, doing certain things. I mean, sometimes we lend stuff from the US, but it's only in the 1970s that the women in the US got a bank account of their own. So if we really think about what are the advancements that have been made, somebody would have had to make a decision. I mean, there are reasons why the Gandhis are observed. There's a reason why the Malcolm X and the Martin Luthers are observed. Interesting that, sometimes when you talk about men, but there's so many great ways in which different people have shifted this space. So it's all about just making space for other people. So, women talk about, we stand on the shoulders of our mothers and our grandmothers. So if I get to also then hoist somebody else up to get to see it further to where they want to go, sure. So even, activists is also, new terminology. I mean, the whole movement has moved into, and we've co-opted terminologies, mostly from the global north and Europe, that we've taken to kind of fit in. And sometimes when you're applying for an application, you have to put what you are and stuff like that. But it's really just being a friend, I think. And I think when you read the introduction for Friends for Life, sometimes it's a good reminder of how they came into being. And I think it's also a good reminder of us really just wanting to be friends first and befriending somebody. So the label, I think, sometimes just allows us to maybe feel better that we're actually doing stuff sometimes, but yeah, it's just being there when needed. Because I always say, I'm always just willing to be an extra pair of hands, not necessarily having to use my brain, but if I could, if you need me to use my hands, I'm there too. So, yeah.
All right, Amanda, I'll bring you back in. I know we lost you there for it. I just want to bring you back in just now. Narissa, you're commenting on our Facebook. If you wish to reach out to us, because I'm not seeing your question here, but you have admitted that we touched on it. If you want more information, can you post your comment, or can you reach us on our Facebook page or our website if you're not comfortable here? Yes, Narissa, we're seeing you, but we're not seeing your question. Okay, go ahead, Amanda. You were saying something when you got dropped.
Yes, but I will move on from that because I like what Nicole just said. While you were speaking, Nicole, you reminded me of a very famous line that came from Audre Lorde, in which she says, "We are not single issue people," showing, of course, the intersection between different identifications. And of course, we can also note parallels between different movements, the movement for racial justice, the movement for gender justice, and parallels between those and this movement towards queer justice. So my next question, posing to the three of you, do you find that your experiences as Black women have made you more empathetic towards the LGBT movement and the causes of persons within those movements? I see Nicky seems to be ready to answer this question. No? All right, Joella, how about you?
You need to unmute, Joella.
Unmute, Joella.
Sorry. But yeah, absolutely, totally. Especially for me, one of the biggest things, and I know I said it before, when they keep on saying, so why gay people just can't like do their things, and then why do they need to be shown on TV, and like why they keep on pushing their agenda down our throats and that kind of stuff. And for me, that's the biggest thing as a Black woman. Yo, do you understand how important it was for me to see myself on a show, to see, like, do you understand what it meant when Wendy Fitzwilliam won Miss Universe? How that made me feel like, oh God, look, I reach. So in the same way that when it is normalized for, So that made it easier for me to understand that somebody does not feel that, or they either like the same sex, or they do not feel that they don't identify with the gender that in which they were assigned at birth, and all that sort of things, where that is a true feeling. And then they get to watch a show where where they are just people that just being just like they are. And so that representation, yes, totally made me, as a Black, dark-skinned, little plus-size woman, see, because when I could look at a show and see it, when I could look at people in corporate and see somebody looking like me, whether it's locally or internationally. So just representation, yeah, that made it very important and very easy. And I don't understand how people are not understanding. Yes, you're a cis man or a cis woman. By the way, all these new terms, I swear it took me a little while to even understand cis. But yes, you're a natural man or a woman and understand that way, or whatever cis means. But don't you just understand that it's important to see yourself? And no, nobody is trying to make your child gay. If your child born gay, they're born gay anyway. So they just want to feel like they're going to kill themselves because they are not seeing anybody else looking like, aren't you just listening to what people are saying? How could you not get that? How could you not? When they see two gay people, they're just understanding that there are different people in the world. It's not going to make your child like the same sex. Stop it. And see. Sorry.
Bravo. You're absolutely right. You see, one of the challenges I have found is an inability sometimes in persons to see relationships, how these things relate to each other. Like recently, I was having a conversation with someone online who was talking about the gay agenda, and they find now every time they look at the Cartoon Network, all these cartoons have the gay agenda. So I had to let the person know, you mean like it's the same way how every single thing we looked at when we were children had a romantic relationship between a man and a woman. You mean exactly like that? And I like the point you made about Black representation in media. I mean, when we were young, we didn't see things, and that was the 1980s, which is really just yesterday. So can't we make a better tomorrow for someone who doesn't feel represented today? Thank you, Joella. So Nicky is ready now.
Just now, wait, before Nicky goes. No, seriously. Sorry, Nick. How come people not getting that and not understanding that? Like, I don't understand. How do you not understand that? That is all somebody wants to see. Do you or not understand that children will want to kill themselves? Oh, good grief. If you are a Black female, didn't you put on a towel and walk with like that? Didn't you realize that that was a problem? Didn't you when you got older, didn't you realize that that was a problem? That when you thought that the color of your skin was wrong because you did not see yourself, because you did not see anybody in a high position in that. So finally, little steps are being made. Sometimes you might actually see yourself in a little ad in Trinidad, and it wouldn't be just some dotish, stupid ad. It would be like a real proper ad and whatever. You might see yourself on the cover of some Yeah, you know, when you, I mean, because for my age, I'm 47, yeah. You know, so when my mother was able to see all her children working in banks, but she knew that she couldn't work in a bank and whatever. So when you see them taking pictures at carnival times and you're seeing people that look like you included, like, don't you realize that that just means that you are now being accepted? It was a big deal because when you were a child, you literally wanted to be white, or you felt that white was right, and that was actually brainwashed to you. So do you imagine how a little gay child, because the child was born that way, the child felt wrong. So when a child is born feeling something different, feeling weird, that when they see a normal show and that the person is like them, they'll be like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me, because there's nothing wrong with them. It's not an agenda. Nicky, go ahead.
Very good, very good. Reminded of a philosopher from when I was an undergraduate who said, I think it's Ortiz, who said, our true history is a history of our images. Meaning, of course, people who are allowed to be a part of the picture, people who are alienated from the picture. You're absolutely right. And may we continue to be more inclusive with our representation. So now we're moving to Nicky.
Joella, I completely enjoyed that. It had me laughing. I had to try and maintain some level of decorum here. As a Caribbean person of color, yes, representation does matter. And funnily enough, when I was at UWI, I had the same problem, but in reverse, because Joella, unlike you, I was not dark enough, right? So yeah, it's very different, but I hear where you're coming from. I was in UWI at that time where, you know, there was a whole movement. So, you know, there are no roles to get in a play, because when the play is called Guinea's Other Sons, African Voices in the Slave Trade, the only role that I could have gotten was Massa Wife, right? It's so representation does matter. And I think for us, particularly as Caribbean people of color who identify with, particularly with me, who identify with a very mixed ancestry, it does help in our allyship, our activism, because when we travel, when we go out there in North America, in Europe or whatnot, as white passing as I am in Trinidad, when I go out there, it's a different story. It's if I am Latina, if you know, it's always asked, what are you? So I can only imagine the feeling of not being able to fit in, not being different from everyone else. The high school where I went, I went St. Francois, and yes, and it was only in my adulthood, someone from a St. Francois group posted a pic of us, and I'm like, hey, is that one in the front there me? And they responded, yes, Nicky, that's you. You were the only one who looked like that in our entire year body. And I'm like, huh, 'tis true. So in as much as I felt included, I was never made to feel that I wasn't Black enough, I wasn't whatever enough. I was very included, very loved.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Reds.
I think it
yes,
is.
Reds.
Yes. I think it is our responsibility to extend, especially as people of color, to extend that spirit of inclusion to members of another community who is right now being very excluded. As Nicole said, particularly as women, we just got these rights, you know, a minute ago. We just got these rights a minute ago. I think it still exists, because a friend of mine a couple of years back told me when she wanted to get her tubes tied, she had to get her husband's permission. And I'm like, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, so it is our responsibility as if we want to be called allies, if we want to be called activists, supporters, whatever we want to be called, to assist people in feeling included. And as Joella said, there's nothing wrong with being the way you want to be, you know.
Yeah.
Love who you want to love, do what you want to do, who you hurting.
You're
I
right.
am so excited to hear what Nicole has to say on this.
Mhm.
I'm just waiting.
Well, that's a kind of, I think it's a kind of a tough question to answer. Although I think Nicky kind of touched on it, that yeah, growing up female is never easy in the Caribbean. That's first. And I think the only thing that I could possibly attach it to is being a young person at the time that I was a young person. And I remember recently describing to somebody that possibly having the youth revolution at the time when there was a youth revolution may have been a little easier for young people at that time to gravitate into these spaces, do the work, and some of us are now placed and you know in spaces to do other work. So those are the only two things that I could possibly use as a maybe a mirror, because I've really recognized sometimes when I hear other persons tell their histories that my experience is hugely different than a lot of people. And maybe just based on socialization and how and where I grew up. I mean, grew up in what, suburban, you know, Trinidad, right out of, you know, Samhain area where everybody kind of mixes. So, you know, everybody's almost the same. And when you ask that question, Amanda, it's sometimes it's a catch because even though we like to say and think that, you know, Trinidad is this cosmopolitan space, I've been able to kind of blend in a little. So I have totally different experiences from Nicky and Joella. Although I understand Nicky's piece about when you travel, it's a totally different story. Even then I get to blend in, you know. So I don't think I have any of those stories then. Maybe later on when people figure, as I said before, I don't belong or I shouldn't be here. So that's a really tough, again, I don't know. I find all those questions are really tough for me, but yeah, I think also too, and I think this also helps. And I think most people can identify either the plus or the minus in this, depending on how you get into the work and who takes you under their wing, because you could want to attach yourself to somebody and that person doesn't want you to attach. So I would think persons who would have taken me under their wing, or just based on the work that I do, I kind of get to slip into spaces almost unannounced and do the work and then, you know, get to move on. I think has helped me tremendously. My early work, I think in the sexual reproductive health realm, allowed me to gravitate with ease into the women's movement and then allowed me other spaces. So I think my alignment kind of helped me maybe buffer, because there may be people who don't like me and I really don't have a clue, you know, but I've never really faced the harsh stuff that I know a lot of other prisoners have felt in this space. So I've always been grateful for people who I work with, because it's be like, you know, we work hard, we play hard, you know, and I guess too, organizations also be like that. So like when you work with organizations like Red Cross, who have as one of their 7 principles, you know, non-discrimination and those sorts of principles, you really get to work in a space where, you know, you're not supposed to, at least, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. You're not supposed to be discriminatory. You're not supposed to be as harsh as you would want to be. So I've always been thankful that my road has been pretty easy. And I know I always have to be very careful how and where I say that statement, because I know it's not everybody's journey.
You know what's very similar between the contributions from you, Nicole, Joella, as well as Nicky, is that in addition to identifying the intersections between your different experiences as human beings, you're also identifying your own privileges as well in relation to your allyship. And it got me to thinking about not just inclusion, but meaningful inclusion. And I'm sure Faye and Rudy will agree with me concerning this, because we know oftentimes, and I see this all the time in advocacy, privilege is ever present. And we say all the time we're including people, but who are we meaningfully including? Who occupies the front lines? Who gets to say the most? Who takes up the most space, you know? So one question I want to get to afterwards would be, how are we meaningfully including the LGBT persons in our environment?
And to take this step publicly with us.
Yeah.
You are one strong woman.
Trying to be.
Yeah. You are, but reach out to that number.
And I'll try to advise anybody else who listening on our live right now, if they're going through a certain situation, to speak up and talk about your situation, because you will get help. I get out of a very dangerous situation, and I'm trying to live my life now, but it's kind of hard still, because I have memories of what I went through, but at least you'll be out of that bad situation you're in. So at least speak up and say something, and somebody will help you to get out of it.
Yes.
Yeah. All I want to tell somebody who listening right now.
Thank you so much, Narissa. Your voice is so important, and all through your contribution, I guess keep remembering how very important Pride is, how very important these events are, because they do give great space to voices such as yours. I'm glad that you joined us this evening. There was one thing that you said that I found so powerful, and that it relates to exactly what Faye just asked, and what Nicole had started answering, and that was the question of the necessity for sex, gender, and sexuality education as part of the school curriculum, and the ways in which this has been received nationally by certain bodies, specifically religious bodies. So Nicole, if you can continue what you had started just now, please.
Sure. And when I use the word young, it's just, to me, it's just easier when we start young people on a road of education younger, and it allows us to kind of shape their thinking in certain ways. And as you know, Faye said, we really give this education to every and anybody, inclusive of persons who are differently abled. And I mean, it's really interesting to see them really gravitate to the information, because they are also a sector of the population that sometimes is ignored.
Yes. Wish they could reach a more extensive audience, I should say.
Yes.
Agreed. Totally agree.
When I went through that situation, I reached the police. They didn't really think I could have gone through the situation what I went through, because they said because I wasn't like a Spanish or something, they thought it was only happening to Spanish people and like foreigners who come into the country. They didn't expect it to be happening to like local, somebody who actually from Trinidad.
Exactly. And it's really unfortunate that this perception of the migrant population exists, because we know for a very long time we've had an extensive list of especially missing women and missing girls in Trinidad and Tobago, and these cases are often never solved. And one of the obvious motivations for some of these disappearances has been exactly human trafficking, which you've identified, and that is an area that has not received enough concern from
And as a reason why I probably might able to like push some more awarenesses from it, because when they found out my abuser was a female, by me being a female and my abuser was a female, they were shocked at the first time. Then they took it seriously.
Yeah. And trust me when I tell you, on this platform, we understand that even within the queer community, there is a concern about violence towards women, and more specifically, violence that women receive from other women. We know of situations in which this has happened. And so, Narissa, I know that when you spoke to the police or whoever else who may have been dealing with your case, it may have been a very alienating experience for you to find that they didn't even think that this was possible.
I could give all the pictures of who the person is, all kind of stuff, because they wanted me to bring them into custody. But I know how them court cases work. It take time, and I literally didn't want to put myself through that, because I going through that. They want me to get a statement of like every exact detail of every uncomfortable situation I went through. And
yes,
I did try. I told them I couldn't do it, but then I said I tried. And when I started trying and started talk about everything I was going through, I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Really,
That system is
so a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, that system is really oppressive and overburdens people.
They need to find a next way for people to report a crime and expect relating for them to relate every situation they went through. For that was just too much for me to relate to, and I couldn't do it.
I understand. You know what was interesting is this week, Faye, I was listening. My aunt is very religious and I see her every day. So I come across here and she's always praying and there's mass. And then one day, in this week, Archbishop Jason Gordon was on television trying to explain exactly what he meant in the article. And it was interesting for me to see him make a distinction between between his own LGBT advocacy, as he states it, and what he meant in terms of the question of the gender ideology. And he said that it is, of course, very important for us to welcome us, by us he meant Roman Catholics, for us to welcome all persons.
For saying it because of you?
What's that?
He said it only because of you, or he said like he actually mean it?
Well, this is what I'm getting to. So he said it was very important because this is, of course, the work of Jesus Christ in the earth, that people should feel welcome and not dehumanized in any way, even if they are, and he didn't say gay, he said same-sex attracted, even if they are same-sex attracted. But what he found that he had challenges with was exactly the language that was being used within the last couple of years. And he found that specifically as it relates to how we identify men and how we identify women, and the ways in which we now identify men and women is what he, and I think when he speaks not just for himself, but for the organization he represents as well. He found that he had a certain conflict, a certain
so basically he just want to agree with certain stereotype, like what the media just say, and he going against it still at the end of the day.
Yeah, so there are some things that he's willing to make allowances for, and I'm saying this specifically trying to represent the position that he had taken. These are not my views. These are not my views. I'm saying this for anybody in the viewership who may feel a little triggered right now. He said there are certain things he's willing to make allowances for, but others he's still struggling with, and he finds it difficult to resolve this struggle based on the position of the church.
No, that is not your views. That's just his views, and he don't know how to comprehend certain stuff. So
yeah, and you know, Narissa, listening to your story, I think that people like Archbishop Gordon needs to hear stories such as this, because I feel oftentimes, especially when people who are not, especially people who are not involved in LGBT advocacy, sometimes.
Where he from?
Pardon me?
Archbishop Gordon, you know, say, want to hear my story. Where he from?
Where is he from? He's from Trinidad. He's Archbishop of Port of Spain.
Which church? When I said that one.
Roman Catholic, the Roman Catholic Church.
Which cat?
Suggesting that it no longer start in primary school, but start in early childhood education.
Yes.
And we recognize that parents are sometimes lost, and we just saying,
Exactly.
recognize your inability, but say to yourself,
Not the inability, they need to understand their children's abilities.
agreed, totally agree. Their inability to share information they don't have, and be willing to take themselves to an institution that will not discriminate, but would be willing to share information in an age-appropriate manner. And there's several of them, family planning being one, and there are others. So I just want to say, the education is what's going to get us through, but we do recognize within, the most current past is that we really
I
need to.
know how you speak. You speak as a very educational person. So
We also need to vet organizations too, because there are some organizations that may do more harm than good. I can end it there.
Okay.
yeah.
Joella, what's your view as an educator?
For me, not only as an educator, but a lot as just somebody who is very much in the community, because as we were saying, when you're looking at how can you be an activist and how can you be an ally, for me, I would more prefer to have to go along the path of not just the person in the situation, but like the mother, because I may encounter Narissa's mother, in regular everyday life type of thing. So I would like to be the person now just sharing that, because I feel that myself, who will be somebody just like Narissa's mother, that I maybe a little younger, but I understand, but I
Can I pause you
understand.
for a
Yeah.
minute?
Sure.
Okay. You wouldn't be able to encounter my mother as they say as be like a little younger. Yes, you'll probably be younger than my mother. My mother she'll be 70 in October, sorry. My mother lives in America, so she haven't been in Trinidad in like years. I haven't seen my mother in well, apart from when she knows how to come, I haven't seen my mother in like 18 years until 2 years ago.
So, but not just like specifically your mother, but any other mother, aunties, anybody out there in the general community who has that thinking and who gonna try to be pushing that sort of mindset towards younger people in their charge, even other teachers, because as I said, I do tertiary education. So just normalizing how, but to help others understand that no, there are people, and especially younger people, who need to be treated equally, or co-workers. We should treat our co-workers, let them feel that it's a safe space. So I feel in that way I could just assist others to, let's create safe spaces. Let's understand.
Okay, but while it may not mean everything to you, there are many others on this call too that she would probably be speaking to also, or it's their experience and they will get to understand it. It may not be exactly for you. Nikki, are you still with us?
I understand what you're trying to say.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So as an educator, what was your view on sex and sexuality education?
I 100% think it should be taught in schools. Unfortunately, we as educators, many of us, we are ill-equipped. We have not been given the necessary training. I can only speak on what works for me. Any discussion on our changing bodies and the like, I try to keep it light, try to keep it normalized. We don't ever get into sexuality in that way, especially in the institution that I am in. But I do agree, children need to be informed. Many things need to be normalized, particularly with our young girls. They need to know that period is not a bad word. They need to know that changing bodies, growing up, feelings, it's all perfectly normal. So
Yeah,
yes.
I'm not agreeing with everything you were saying right now. But what you were saying before was kind of, no offense, don't take no offense. But what you're saying right now is the right thing you're saying. So,
As for
Nikki,
me or for Joella, because Joella and I were speaking on different things.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Oh no. I have given my contribution. So to summarize, yes, I do think sex education should be taught in schools, and we as educators, particularly educators of the younger population, we need to be properly trained on how to deal with it, because that is sorely lacking in our teacher education.
can I ask you a question? Are you you ready to teach that level of school children sexual education in school?
It depends upon what you mean by sex education. We teach about
Well, it's not
puberty,
like I need to
changing
teach this.
bodies.
You want to teach you want to teach sex education. So you have to tell me what it is you want to teach them. Okay, I'm gonna pay it this way. I want to be a concerned parent. What you going and teach my child as sex education? What you going and tell me? Say we have a meeting in the school. What you going to teach my son as a sex education? Because I have a 15-year-old son in secondary school. So
so
what you want to teach me?
Narissa, I think Nikki and Nicole, as well as Joella, touched on whatever the education is, it has to be targeted to the age of the child, the ability of the child to comprehend or to take in
Well, yeah,
whatever they
no,
are. So,
that I told
yeah,
her my son is 15 years old, so I
so,
want to know what you'll teach my
yeah,
son in
but
school.
okay, but the topic today isn't about sex education right now. And actually think we have a session on that sometime, Rudy, in the
Okay.
future.
We
Yes, we
had one
actually
just
have,
earlier this year too, earlier this month as
yes.
well.
Yeah, so
Sex and sexuality.
we'll
Yeah.
send you the calendar, Narissa, and you can raise that question directly at that point in time. So Amanda, it's 9:32, and we did promise these ladies.
Well, you'll send me directly, please, after.
Will do, yeah. Amanda, last thoughts, I guess.
Yes, so we are going to wrap up our thoughts now. The last thing we were looking at was concerning sex, sexuality, and gender education with reference to the discussion sparked by the Archbishop. We also covered the intersection of experiences and how this intersection of experiences, whether it is an intersection of a racial experience with a gender experience, with a sexuality experience, predispose us to being more empathetic towards each other's concerns. We spoke also about the meaningful inclusion, not just inclusion, but meaningful inclusion, and also about ways in which we identify persons who are at risk and how we go about the necessary interventions that those persons may need and may in fact be seeking, as we even saw with Narissa. So as we're wrapping up now, to the people on tonight's panels, do you have any closing words? And I want to start with Joella.
Yes, so I will just like to say thank you. Thank you for opening my eyes in the ways that I can be an ally to the community, the ways that I personally through my experiences and my community can help others just come to terms and what I can do. So thank you for that opportunity.
And thank you for sharing so generously with us, Joella. And I look forward, once quarantine is over, to coming down and doing some classes with you as well.
Sure.
Nicole, closing words?
Sometimes we wonder why we get placed in situations sometimes, and I could say, you know, I think, you know, I only spoke to Sharon again, yes, last night. So you just have to be grateful sometimes to be placed in situations, to be reminded why you have to do the work and why you get chosen to do the work, because I think a lot of people come in but don't stay. And always grateful for the opportunities to share, and just remind people that self-care is also a big deal. That
Yes.
in doing this work, self-care is a major piece. So thanks for the opportunity as well.
You're welcome. We can't pour from an empty cup. And I'm glad that you bring up the point about self-care, Nicole, and I thank you for your contributions this evening. They were useful in so many ways. And more than that, just for being yourself. I think this evening you demonstrated a lot of grace that's so necessary in this work that we do. Thank you very much. Next, Nicky, closing remarks.
Much like my other ladies on this panel, I thank you all for including me. When I got the message to, you know, join us, we having a little meeting, I really was not anticipating all of this, but I am very glad that I came on. This is valuable work. This is work that needs to be done. It helps so many people out there. It opens people's eyes to what's going on. And yeah, keep up the good work, and thanks for allowing us allies to work with you all. We appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nicky. You're absolutely right. Sometimes platforms go in directions that we did not necessarily intend. But I think one of the very interesting things about tonight is the opportunity to not only talk about allyship, but to put it into practice. And I feel that this evening, all persons present on the call, in fact, put their allyship into practice. I'm very proud of all of you. Thank you so much. And with that, I will turn back to Faye.
So my last words is thank you. Thank you so much, ladies, for using your energy and your creativity and your voice to affect change. And Joella might argue that she ain't doing much because she said every that, but no, every bit counts. And we don't know sometimes how we impact people. And sometimes it just takes a little minute or just a smile or interaction to change the day for someone. So thank you very much for changing our lives by you being a part of it and for the work that you do. And not just for the work that you do within our community, but whatever you do also impacts the entire country, our nation. Every person that you meet, you impact positively. I'm certain of that. And it goes a long way in helping us to achieve what we need to. And now I'll turn back to Rudy. And I just want to, one last thing to everybody who's on this call, everybody who's watching in Facebook, everybody who has thought about anything here, reach out to us. We're here to listen, we're here to support. Again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to reach out to you.
Wow, thank you, Faye, Amanda, Joella, Nicky, Nicole, and Nikisa, Narissa, Ainsley, everyone who joined tonight. I know, Faye, you all hear me say this all the time, that I'm a firm believer that everything in life is connected. And this session nearly did not happen. And Nicky, I owe you a special drink, because I will admit publicly that it was a very last minute invitation, but Nicky in particular said yes without hesitation, as did Joella, Nicole, and Amanda. But there are times when we question if we're doing too much at PrideTT. You know, when people see a calendar of 30 plus events, and each one has sometimes spin-off activities, and we want to post things throughout the year. It is at times like this that I am convinced that there's more to be done. But people got tonight to see through the powers that be, whatever powers you might believe that they exist, firsthand why this work is important and how critical allyship is. So I think I speak for all of us, that those of us that have been able to navigate being queer, we could not have done it without allies. So, you know, on behalf of the entire team, thank you all very much for being brave and being supportive and just being fantastic human beings. And, you know, as Nicole said, you were chosen, I guess, for this calling. Speaking of other callings, during the month of Pride, the Trans Coalition, the Trinidad and Tobago Trans Coalition, is hosting a chat room every day, Monday to Friday, from 6 p.m. on HIV awareness and education. So you can look forward to that as well and share the information for people who would be interested. I also want to let people know that Faye is taking on another role at PrideTT as the Chief Coordinator for the Extended Generation Gap Mentorship, which is going to be a 10-month program we're running in collaboration with Scotiabank for 30 queer persons between the ages of 17 to 25 to receive amazing character, business, skills development, mental health and wellness. So if you're between the ages of 17 to 25 and you belong to the queer community, this program is specifically designed for you. And again, if you stay tuned to all of our social media pages, our website, our app on both the Google and Apple stores, well, it'll be on Apple Store soon, but it's already on the Google Store. You can get all of this information and continue to reach out to us. Thank you to all our partners, all our viewers, the moderator, the panelists. And tomorrow, we actually have a very interesting discussion with Women's Caucus and UniPride on how we can strengthen and sustain the women's movement in Trinidad and Tobago. So, and then on Thursday, we have a special session, again with Women's Caucus in UniPride and the TTPS on gender-based violence. So the next two sessions treat directly with some of the issues that were raised here tonight. And again, I hope that people see that there's always thought behind, you know, the 30 plus events that we have. So thank you again, everyone. With that, be safe. Remember, we are collecting registrations for our vaccinate. Instead of a parade this year, we're having a vaccinate. So if you are interested in getting vaccinated, we are working with the Ministry of Health to organize that. And again, what can I say? Be safe, love one another, and try and have a happy Pride. Good evening, and we'll see you all again.
Hi, Nicky and Joella. Y'all can hear me?
It's still live on Facebook.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Rudy, you gave Narissa my personal number.
Guys, I think the recording is still going on. It still says live on Facebook.